Hey everyone, it's Wally
and Nanette
from Supreme Gecko. Thanks for joining us on a Thursday night. I know there's a lot going on in everybody's lives, especially in the summer, especially with all the, and I won't say this anymore in the show, with all the politics going on.
Oh,
I know there's a lot going on. We're not going
Just
there.
Let
We're
it
gonna
go.
zoom right past that subject because we have a very, very special guest. We have Bobby Kovic on tonight with GECKO COVE, and this is going to be a good one. If you want to find out anything about gargoyles, if you want to talk about gargoyles, this is the show for you. This is the big show for you because Bobby, it's kind of funny because I was talking to somebody recently and we were talking about YouTube and lives and enthusiasm, and Bobby's name came up over and over and over and over again. He has the passion that we should all strive for in this hobby to move it forward and to do different things that are lighting the fire for us inside. And Bobby's that person. Just real quick, Nanette, where have we been the last week?
Lost.
Last
weekend we went to Schaumburg. The week, before that?
Yeah, Schaumburg. Let's talk about Schaumburg
we just went to Schaumburg.
Take up a lot of time.
We went down to Schaumburg and we did a walkthrough and visiting, and we took Crystal to her first real big show. She was excited. She got to meet people she really wanted to meet. She got lots of pictures with people, held snakes, saw other animals, got to meet Emily again from
Emily
Snake
who?
Discovery. And she was like all over that one because she couldn't wait to see her again. And she was very impressed that Emily remembered her. So that really made her day. She was a trooper. We stopped a lot. We got stopped a lot. We talked to tons of people. By tons and tons of people. And she stood and listened, and she got involved in conversations. We had a great time.
My favorite moment of the show, I had so many favorite moments. We had many favorite moments. We're going to talk about one tonight, about how to do a display, a reptile show display. But one of my favorite moments, I'm going to talk about my favorite moment, then I'm going to talk about my worst embarrassing moment, and then we're going to bring Bobby on. But my favorite moment was Dave Kaufman. Dave Kaufman, I don't know how the guy does it, because every time I meet somebody that I kind of know or don't know, I struggle in the back of my mind, okay, who is this person, and names, and how did we last talk? Did we talk about leopard geckos? Did we talk about isopods? So it takes me like 14 minutes to put the gears all together. Dave sees us from afar. Hey, Wally, how are you doing? How's that? And just, such a natural person. It's in his smile. So my favorite moment was, click, we got a couple of pictures. We got one of Dave with Crystal, and I posted it on Facebook, and I said, and if you don't know, Dave Kaufman is one of the biggest reptile YouTube creators out there. And on the caption of the picture with Crystal and Dave, I said, Dave meets a true big YouTuber. Oh,
Dave meets a true YouTuber?
Dave meets I just lost my screen there.
I saw that. Dave
meets a true YouTuber. So that was my favorite, one of my favorite, there's so many, but one of my worst moments was, again, me and names are terrible. So we walked up to, do you remember when we walked up to Illinois Valley Geckos? And I saw her first, and I said, hey, Caroline. It's not Caroline, it's Carolyn. Sorry. And I'm probably confusing that right now anyway. So, you guys, if you watch the show, you know that I'm going to call you George at the time anyway. So my apologies. Hey, who's here, Nanette?
J-Bug is here. And Julie Moore.
I see Julie.
And I see, just sounds like Romper Room.
I see Billy.
Jennifer's here. Frank's here. Supreme Gecko came. Angie's here. Herbert Denny's here. Laura's here. Keep going. Illinois Geckos is here. JP Lizards. JP, we didn't have a table. We just walked around. If that message earlier was you saying that you didn't see our table. Gambit Geckos. Cassandra's here. You're going too fast. Bernadette is here. I think that's everybody now. And no, I did not touch a snake.
Crystal held one that was probably about 6 feet long, and then she held a little, it was like little hog nose, about as big as my pen. And I tell you what, folks, if you know hognose at all, you know their habit is to bump. We're going to say it nicely. They bump when when they feel threatened. They bump. So I'm not going to say the word. So Crystal had one holding it, and sure enough, it bumped her, and she kind of flinched a little bit. And I wish I could remember the name of the vendors.
I don't remember the vendor.
She walked Crystal all the way through this, and the next time she the lady reached down to get the animal, and the hognose bumped Crystal again, and Crystal laughed. To take somebody from having a little bit of fear with working with animals, especially snakes, and to go from that to, ha ha ha, this is what they do, this is common, oh my gosh, how about that? So they were great. So good. I have pictures posted, and I called them out in the pictures and in the video that I did from Monday's video. They were fantastic. Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Frank's got a link out there for you already.
Yeah, I think I just
on the ball.
Oh my gosh,
oh,
Frank, you are always on.
Carolyn is here. Carolyn is here. Ha ha
ha. So I blabbed enough. But I do want to bring up one more thing. Sorry, folks. Sorry, Bobby. We did a video last week for our Buy Me a Coffee members, and I cannot tell you how.
A week ago Friday
last week. I cannot tell you how much we tried to prepare for the video. When we did the video, it really turned out pretty well. It was a full tour of our facility. It went from room to room to room to all 28 rooms. No, we don't have that many rooms.
Felt like it.
But apologies for all the spider webs, all the geckos that were out and about that weren't in enclosures, all the food that was dropped. And no, I'm just kidding. Everything was.
Whose room were you in?
Yeah, exactly. Everything was pretty in line. The only problem that we did have was we had a problem with some sound occasionally, and I rewatched it and I posted it anyways. A little bit of lag in a couple of places with the video, but a lot of issues later on as we got further and further away from our router and signals and everything. It was a little bit hard to hear us talking. So I apologize for that. I hope that it was still a fair enough video that it worked to hear us and you could get the gist of what we were trying to show everybody. Like the next day I went out and bought router extenders and everything because I really want to do more. I really want to do more shows or at least videos downstairs, more lives downstairs, and show off some of the animals and let you guys ask questions about some of the things that we're doing downstairs. But it was a bunch of fun for us. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Frank. We did have waffles for dinner, though, Frank, afterward. I had frozen waffles. That's what we ate. We were too tired to cook and too tired to do anything else.
We showed the inside of the refrigerator. The problem was that the waffles were in the freezer with all the frozen snake food.
Not downstairs.
Okay, let's bring... Bobby, thanks for your patience here. So Bobby does another show called GECKO COVE, and I'm going to tell you folks, there's a handful of shows on YouTube and on TikTok and on Instagram that I really, really, really wish I could watch every single time, and I do try to watch as many shows as I can. Bobby's is right up there with GECKO COVE because he digs into details and he features, he highlights other people way more than he does himself, even though he's doing some amazing things. Why does he do that? Because he has so much passion in the hobby. And, if anything that we get out of this interview tonight, I hope that you see the passion and excitement he has for these animals, gargoyles, and for the hobby itself. So, Bobby, before we even start, I want to thank you for that. But we're going to dig into Bobby and GECKO COVE and find out more about the wonderful, wonderful gargoyles that Bobby is working with. Let's bring them on. Bobby, how are you doing?
Hey, thank you. You're making me blush here.
No, my apologies because, I said that I would, blab for about 1 minute and it's now 14 minutes. No, it's 9 minutes. It's always that.
Oh, no, it's okay. We're only going to be on for 20 minutes, right?
20, 25, right. Something 25, like that. Yeah. For 2 hours. Frank at some point is going to say, let's go 24.
Yeah, we're gonna hear 24 hours.
That's okay. Yeah, 24 hours. Just keep going,
How are you doing?
Oh, thank
How are
you.
you doing?
I'm fantastic. I really can't complain. I've got the summer off because I work in education. Plus, I got to do Schaumburg last week, and I just hatched out the best gecko I've ever hatched out. So I'm on cloud 9 right now, and I got invited onto your show. So what could be going wrong?
So 3 or 4 goods equal 1 bad, I guess. Maybe being on our show, that's probably the bad thing for you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
So
all right.
you have the
Got
summer
the gun
off. So
pointed in my
tell us,
back. Yeah.
so tell us about how this all works together with your career and the animals, and tell us a little bit more about Bobby and Bobby's family, which I know a little bit about, but I'd love to have the viewers hear a little bit about this too. Hey, Gecko Man, please.
So as far as the career goes, I started off going to go into private counseling. So I'm a school counselor. And then after being, in grad school for a little bit, I was actually, while in grad school, working as a dog trainer. And it was an absolute I've always worked with dogs. My grandmother breeds golden retrievers, and I got my first miniature Australian Shepherd, Beckett. And I just, when I really, and this is more in my adult life, thanks to YouTube and other things, other resources online, I go down rabbit holes. And when I'm interested in something, I just dig in 110%. I can't stop consuming information because I don't know anything. And even after a year, I still feel like I don't know anything, right? It's one of those things where the more you know, the less you really know. But what happened was I was really interested in just the, working with the animals, but also working with the kids, right? And so a lot of it is, I hate to compare kids to dogs, but it's a lot of conditioning, it's a lot of support, it's a lot of management, and just helping them through and educating them. And so they really mesh together. And then the more I got into animals, I started working at a big name pet store. I won't say which one. There was a bearded dragon there, and the bearded dragon, I was not a reptile guy. I was always a cute and fluffy kind of guy. And this thing just kept coming up the class. It was the friendliest thing. And I started just taking it out, and I realized how amazing that animal was. And I would actually bring it around the store with me, with it just hanging on my shoulder. And it was fantastic. So I got to have, I learned about the animal so that if people asked, I could go and share that information with people who were interested. And I remember the day that animal sold, I sold it to a young son and his father who were looking for their very first pet. And, I gave them as much information as I could. I walked them around the store, and I just kind of fell in love with educating the next generation. And so bringing that into where I work, I actually ended up getting my own bearded dragon. And I jumped in full with a bright red one. It was a Dunner leatherback hypo. They had every gene in it. So I don't ever do anything small. But I ended up getting that. And then I convinced my boss to let me actually have it as a therapy animal. So I had it in my office for, 4 years, something like that, until they realized that I was bringing in roaches, which I guess is not a good thing at a high school. So brought it home. And then, I got into gargoyle geckos because at that time I started having kids, and, I kind of downsized. So I did sell off the dragon. But around, I won't say the thing that happened in 2020, around that time, I had a lot of extra time and I had some extra tanks. So I ended up getting my very first gargoyle. I traded one of the bearded dragon tanks to this wonderful lady. I don't remember her name, for my very first very first gargoyle gecko, and an enclosure and everything that I needed for one of the bearded dragon enclosures. And I've been hooked ever since. So just down that rabbit hole.
Why gargoyles? Why gargoyles? Why not crusted? Why not crusted geckos? Why not bearded dragons?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to my lifestyle. So whenever I, do anything, buy into anything, I do a ton of research beforehand. I don't jump in, and I really wanted to make sure that I have multiple kids now. I have dogs. I already had a cat. I have a lot of responsibility that I need to take care of. And so I needed something that was lower maintenance than a bearded dragon. And not that bearded dragons are a ton of maintenance,
Right.
but there's lights you got to buy. There's, crickets or roaches or things that you either have to breed or go out and buy. So just added expenses. And so I knew I wasn't going to talking to some people about bearded dragons and just having one. I knew the babies can eat you out of house and home if you're breeding those, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
my intent initially wasn't to breed. It was just to get a few cool pets. Maybe if they bred, it was, a bonus. It would be something to share with my family. But I just, man, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I just, once you get one, these things are like potato chips. They're just, there's so many different cool morphs and colors. And anytime I go on Instagram, there's just always something that I'm a little bit jealous of. So that was one thing. To answer your question about why not crested geckos or other things that are as similar care, right? I was talking with another breeder at first, and I was looking at actually in between a chewy, a lychee, crested gecko, and a gargoyle. And my budget did not have enough money in it for the chewies that I wanted, because some of the chewies were just, again, I like fancy things, right? So, and there was a lot of crested geckos that I loved crested geckos. I think they're amazing. I think that there's a lot of people who come up and tell me, I think they look better than gargoyles. And you know what? I can't fault you. I think they're gorgeous. But I saw how many people were breeding them, and I wanted to kind of distinguish myself. And I thought gargoyles were so cool, especially once I saw my very first red blotch and red super stripe. I was just like, okay, they have me. All right. They're just as cool as some of the coolest crested geckos. And I think that I could, kind of fill that niche because there wasn't as much love for them that I saw between breeders and YouTube and everything else. And I wasn't even playing on YouTube, but it was just more of one of those things where I loved it. I went with it and it worked. I like unique things.
It's interesting because, gargoyles have always been, in my mind, the second fiddle to crested geckos.
Yep.
And I started a long time ago in crested geckos, and it was almost immediately that I started with gargoyles too. And I always said, when some of the reds start popping out, some of these different colors, this hobby is just going to take off. Now, you joined the hobby. You started the hobby about the time that crested geckos were really probably at their peak. Mm-hmm. So you probably had some thoughts about, hopefully we all do the animals that we enjoy, and we love cleaning and feeding every single day. So, and that's the approach that you took with the gargoyles, but you also probably looked a little bit at the whole business part of this whole thing, and how, crusteds had, I'm going to try to reach that high. Crusteds were right here at the time, and we all knew where the market was going. There was only one way for the market to go at that point. But, in contrast, gargoyles have just skyrocketed. Two questions. I'm going to throw two crusteds at you. Number one, what got you started with gargoyles back then from seeing people's pictures? Like, who were you looking at that time? We're going to jump so quickly to GECKO COVE. I don't want to focus on this at all, but give us a couple of names of people, and then kind of a second follow-up question. When did you make that decision to go, not just gargoyles, but I'm going to go high-end gargoyles? And maybe and I asked these two questions together because maybe they tie together.
So it was funny. I just did a Google search, right, of gargoyle geckos, once I started really diving in. And there's this one photo that it's a really pale base with a super blotch, red super blotch. And I think that caught my eye. And I remember going into my local pet store, which it still is right now, Birds and Beasts Pet Shop in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Dan that's one of his favorite species is gargoyles. And man, did I luck out. Okay. For two reasons. One, after that very first gargoyle that I got, I ended up selling that one because I wanted to, I want to have things that I just fall in love with. And it was a pet quality animal. It really was. Nothing wrong with it. It's gorgeous, but it was a pet quality animal. And then, but I ended up seeing on his Facebook page, because I wasn't really big into Instagram back then. It was all Facebook. I could guess my age by that. But so with that, I saw that he had a 6-stripe little baby for sale. So I bolted over there, and he goes, "Man, you were fast." And I go, "Yeah, I'm fast." And it was one that he actually, and this is actually kind of a cool thing, is Hawaii, my girl that's just phenomenal for me. Really beautiful 6-stripe and stayed yellow, which is very unique. He
Yeah.
didn't produce it. So that was the cool thing. So I had all of his line after that to kind of dive into. But he went and after I bought that gecko, he wasn't there the second time I went back, and one of his employees was super nice and goes, "Oh yeah, I know you're interested in gargoyles. You got to see this one." And so he walked me into the back room, and he pulls out this vibrant red, like fire engine red gecko. And at that point, I knew I wanted to create or buy something just like that. And my second gecko was Eve, which is from that same lineage and is that fire red. I mean, it's almost better than what I saw originally. So I lucked out. I kind of fell into the high end stuff. And then my wife is very financially gifted. Let's put it that way. She's got a great mind for that. And I thank God for her every day for that reason and a lot of other reasons. But she sat me down, and I've been in the fish hobby before this as well. And I love the fish hobby. I love keeping tanks. But man, did I blow money. Looking back at how much money I've invested into fish tanks, and the way I did it was just as a keeper, it was no return. And so she said, if you're going to get back into one of these animals, we've got to make this at least neutral, if not make a little bit of a profit. And I said I could do that. And so this is the route I went.
And did you put together any kind of a plan? I hate to say, I'm going to say it anyways. So early in the show,
spreadsheet.
Did you put together a spreadsheet?
I did. No, I got to say this. I didn't. My wife put together a spreadsheet for me, and I asked her, "Can I just steal it and run with it?" And it's still going today. Everything that I buy, from Pangea to new bedding, goes on that spreadsheet, and I track every dollar I spend and every penny that comes in that has anything to do with geckos, just because I want to make sure that I'm kind of grounding myself, because these things, I'd buy a gecko every week if I could. It's one of those things. Now I don't have room and time for them, but it's just it's exciting to get something new. It's fantastic.
I like that saying that it's not really. Sometimes it's finances, sometimes it's room, sometimes it's resources, and the time that it takes to do all of this. Tell us about your current collection. Kind of walk through the whole process the last 3 years, and emphasize with the emphasis on where you're at right now. And we don't need exact numbers or anything, whatever you feel comfortable, mentioning, but what kind of a collection are you working with right now?
I'm very transparent with this. So right now, just looking around my room, I've got between grow outs that I know I'm about a year or less away from, and my current breeders, I've got about 10 to 11 females. I'll probably keep around 10. I've got 4 males right now. I've got a male that I've got from Southern Girl Exotics. That's amazing. She loaned me this male, so I've got 5 males here that are working for me. But only right now this season, just because not everybody was up to size and weight, I've got 3 males working for me, and I've got 5 females working for me. And they've produced some amazing. I've got up to 35 eggs as of today.
Congratulations
out of that. Thank you. My girl Hawaii, 10 eggs last year, 10 eggs this year. It's insane. That was first and second year, and I'm like, you got to slow down, girl. But she's the chunkiest, so she's got great genetics, I guess. But no, it's one of those things where I think right now after the show, I've got, that's cool with this thing, 16 babies in my baby rack and grow out rack. And I've just slowly been building. I would buy the best that I could afford, right? I bought a lot of babies, grew them up, and I have sold off a few of them just because I'm kind of looking at everything and planning on, okay, what do I eventually want to have? And if they develop the way I wanted them to, I'm keeping them, right? Kahuna, I got when he was, and I'll show him off in a little bit. I got him when he was 3 grams from a local guy who's just awesome. And he's never going anywhere because he just developed fantastically. And then I've had others that were great, but just didn't fit my plans. So you've got to make those tough calls because, again, I only have so much time and space. So, yeah.
You hear that? He only has so much time and space. He understands that there's a space restriction.
I'm working on it. So, we're kind of going into a little bit of the business side of things. I want to get back to the hobby, but I do want to ask a business question while we're on it. How do you make that decision? How do you make the decision, and how do you not get? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it.
Go ahead.
How do you not get emotionally tied to every single one of your babies?
I don't know. There are certain ones I'm so attached to. But they're animals, but they're not dogs. I would never give up a dog. I'd never give up a cat. To me, these are amazing. There's some that have my heart forever, and we're never going to leave here. But with so many, even just in the first, 2 breeding seasons, there's so many babies, and it is a lot of work. I mean, people don't realize how much time goes in. I'm feeding these animals, especially the babies, every other day, and a baby takes up just as much time as any adult. My adults are easier than my babies at this point. And so, when I've got 20 of them, that's a lot of little deli cups, and I use those washable ones. And I know there's probably smarter ways. I've heard the portable washing machine, which again would have to go on my budget. So that's probably why I bought it. But I sit there and I clean the little cups every other night. And if I don't, then I get yelled at that they're sitting on the counter and making fruit flies. So it's just, there's a lot of day in and day out work, and that's not a negative, because every time I open a drawer, I'm excited. And when you're dealing with babies, they look different. I mean, 2 weeks makes a world of difference with these little guys. They grow so fast. So it's just, it's everything's a give and take in life.
Are you taking progression? One place that I feel like I fail miserably is I don't take enough pictures. I owe somebody pictures of a red crested gecko for tomorrow, and I'm just dreading it. I hate taking pictures. Do you, though? Do you enjoy taking pictures? Do you have a plan for taking pictures? Do you have progression pictures?
Yes, across the board. I take way too many photos. I'm actually almost out of my Google, space. And my wife is yelling at me to go delete all of them, and I'm like, I can't delete them because this is my it's my baby records. It's like deleting my little kids, photos.
Yeah.
And she jokes I take more pictures of the geckos than I do my 2 boys, which is debatable.
The boys won't hold still. They're just running and bouncing
right.
too hard.
Hold still.
You know what? I've learned a little trick. There are some geckos that don't hold still as much, but so actually right over here is my area where I keep the light box, and then you can see this giant window up here. What I've learned is I've taken some photos outside, and I love the pictures that people take outdoors on their screened-in patio in Florida or wherever they are. I am so afraid, especially with some of the babies, if they jump off my hand and onto my deck. I have a giant deck, and if they get underneath, there's no way for me to get them. No. So the risk to reward for a photograph is just not there for me. So I do have a light box in case there's a really awesome picture I need to take at night. But during the day, this giant bay window is perfect. And so I've actually got an old light box just to keep them contained, and I cut off the top. And so the light comes down perfectly into it. And I use my DSLR for this and this alone. And I just take so many photos. There's got to be at least 1 or 2 good ones. And then I upload them. And again, I just take up all my storage. I do take photos, not on a regular basis. Like I don't schedule out, 2 weeks I'm going to take photos, and then 8 weeks I take photos. That's not what I do. I just, I need baby photos today. And if I have time, I go and I do a whole photo shoot for an hour or so. Same thing with adults. If I'm, scrolling through and updating my website and I go, man, they've got some old photos here. Maybe I should go and update these. I'll just go and do all my breeders in one session. Rarely do I do the full collection anymore, but now it's in sections.
We're going to show some of the pictures that Bobby sent me in just a few minutes. Some of these wonderful, wonderful smoking red gargoyles. In just a minute, folks. But I wanted you showed the light box. You showed that you mentioned that you take a lot of pictures, and will continue doing that because you enjoy it. I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, we're going to come back to that question tonight.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I don't know, and everybody in the chat, let me know if I'm wrong. Does anybody on their webpage, crested geckos, gargoyles, whatever, snakes, show progression pictures? Okay, here's an animal that you can buy. Here's some progression pictures. While you answer that, I'm going to turn back on our lights behind us.
They just went
Do
out.
you plan on anything like that?
Yes, I do. Now with the ones that you're buying, I think that's a little bit more rare depending on how old they are. I know I share them. If anybody wants them, and you're buying a gecko from me, I'll show you if I have them halfway out of the egg. The first few geckos I sold, I actually created a little album and sent it to the people, which I'd love to be able to do that for everybody. But as you grow, it gets a little bit more time consuming. But if anybody wants it and they ask, I'm happy to do it for them because I have them. So that's one thing. As far as breeders that do already have stuff like that out there, I've shouted these two out before for this, and I still think they have some of the best websites. So Kylie at Gargoyle Queen, if you go into her collection, you can go and see not only the lineage, but that she'll go and show all the pictures she has from when they were young, if she produced them, until now, which gives me so much information when I'm looking at my baby and go, okay, how does mine stack up against her, Vapona, which is a crazy super blotch male she has. So things like that. Also, Paige over at Cosmic Exotics, very similar kind of format. She's got a lot of progression photos for each of her breeder adults and her holdbacks, and that's been, I love that. So I do the same thing.
Wow, I can't imagine the time that it takes to do that. But like you're saying, not only does it help you make a decision about maybe purchasing one of their animals, excuse me, but also gives you kind of information to help you make maybe some judgment calls on your own animals. What is this going to look like? It's not 100%, but maybe give you some indication of what yours is going to look like when it gets to be a little bit older and starts changing some of the colors.
Yeah, I've asked breeders for pictures when I know they have some really nice animals, and if I'm trying to recreate something similar, I've reached out to certain breeders, and again, anybody can reach out to me and ask me for things like this. I want to see the baby pictures. I want to see what did it look like straight out of the egg, right? Not again, they're different genetics. Nothing's going to be one for one. They're all unique. Right. But if I can get an idea of, okay, this is what a true amazing six stripe looks like straight out of the egg. Right. And I'm like, I think I see kind of a faint line on the side. Is that going to develop into a six stripe?
Right.
Probably not. But again, it depends on the genetics. But I remember reaching out to Brian at Koala Geckos, and he's just got absolutely fantastic stuff I drool over and still want to get, and he showed me some pictures of his baby straight out of the egg. And I'm like, wow, if I ever produce something like that, I'm just going to have the best time ever. And it happened yesterday. I showed it to him. He goes, you did it. Nice job. You did it. So, yeah, it was great.
And just, if you're like me, one a year, and, you progress to more and more, you want more and more, but just having that one that you go, okay, this is what I worked for all of last year to get this one animal. And that's enough to drive you for another year. It is for me, at least.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is the animal, and I can show it off too if you want real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a pairing that, and this is where you have to be open to other people's suggestions.
Yes.
You have to realize that you might have the best plan, but if someone who's smarter than you speaks, keep your mouth shut and listen. And I had Paige from Cosmic Exotics reach out, and we were talking. Actually, she was interviewing me on my podcast, and I showed her some geckos, and I showed her my girl Bimini, who I didn't have a male for, and I said I might pair this guy to him, and she's like, that definitely do that. Sometimes a blotch and a stripe make the best babies, and man, was she right. I'm so glad I listened to her.
I think also, people that I feel a little bit guilty at this point that I'm maybe getting past the point where I can watch every single one and look at every single animal that I have and say, okay, this is where I want to go with this animal, and this is what I can produce. And I just have to kind of make a draw at some point for holdbacks and okay, I'm going to pick those four. But my point being that the people that have smaller collections are taking that time to go through, even if they have one or two or three pair, they're more in tune, certainly than I am, to maybe what these animals can produce long term.
Sure.
And so, whether, I'm going to listen to like a Joe Hupp that knows so much more than I and has had animals, or, somebody that only has two or three, it really doesn't matter because they probably both are going to have really, really super good input. I'm going to show some pictures. I think that
Please
people
do.
want to see. Go ahead.
He said, please do.
Oh, yeah. Let me go ahead and it's going to take me just a second to pull this up, but if you would want to,
while you do that, I'll show you the baby.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to keep it out long because it's only a day old, guys. Okay.
Oh, this is so cool.
Look
at this. Hold on. Hopefully the camera's picking it up.
Oh my gosh.
It's not even yellow. Usually I'll show you the sibling, the clutch mate, which is also one of my favorites. But this is just like lava red and orange.
Wow.
Isn't that nuts?
That helps at all.
Okay. And it's both sides. So this one's staying with me forever. Right out of the egg. And I've got a great picture, which I'll post on Instagram later. Of it. Literally, I woke up. I was having a really rough night with my son. I was up at 3 a.m. and he was crying, wanted to be held by daddy, which, sounds like a horrible thing, but man, it's nice when they want daddy. And so I'm like, you know what? I know some eggs are about to hatch, and I was really curious what they were going to turn into. So I'm like, all right, before I go running and see him, I'm just going to check my incubator. And it had its head sticking out. And I'm like, all right, Oliver, I know you're in the middle of the night, but come on. And my son was with me, and I got to share that experience.
Oh.
And it was so great. He gets so excited about the geckos. And that's one thing I think really helps drive me and helps my wife accept that I do this all the time, is that the kids love it. My sons, they want to spray the geckos, and they don't you spray the gecko exactly on it. You spray around the gecko, and, so to share something that magical, to watch something be born with your son, it's just amazing.
That was cool.
That is very, very cool. What we're finding with Crystal now, since she's been involved with the hobby for a couple, 3-4 years, is that some of the geckos that she named everything Crystal initially. We had like 7 geckos downstairs. So this is going to be Crystal too. But now she's, and then she started naming them other names. Now that they're growing up, she has that memory of, it was just this big when it was born, and now it's a big gecko. So that's a lot of fun for us to pull forward. I'm going to share some pictures here, Bobby.
Awesome.
Give me just a second. Hopefully we can see this.
How old is your son, Bobby?
So that was my son. I was just talking about is 2.5.
2.5. Cool.
Yep. And then I have an older son who is 5, just turned 5, and he's very proud of that.
Cool.
So, yeah.
This
cool. Is the baby I was talking about earlier. This is I'm sorry. This is Kahuna. I keep mixing up their names. Hopefully I don't do that with my kids. But Kahuna, yeah, exactly.
You'll bring the dog's name in there at some point too.
Yep, there you go. It'll be Cody. But this gecko I got from Oliver Hernandez, which is H2O Reptiles. Really a fantastic breeder. Some of the stuff he produces just blows me away today. And he doesn't post, he doesn't share, but he's just a really cool guy. And he hooked me up with this baby at 3 grams. And it exceeded both of our expectations. This thing I should not be able to have in my collection. So, and it stayed orange. It's a bicolor, which I love, something unique.
I hope our viewers can get the feel of these animals and their colors. Help us, Bobby. One of the things that we've seen recently, I feel, and maybe I'm wrong with this, but I feel that we've seen distinctive names and definitions. Maybe definitions is a better way to describe it. Whereas 10 years ago, is it red, is it yellow, or is it white and black? So help us. Reds have all of a sudden become like 10 different other names. So kind of walk us through these, if you would, if you feel that one of these animals has a different, kind of description, help us with that.
Sure. I think it's still sort of the Wild West, honestly, and that's where I don't get hung up on it. Just because some people call this bacon or reverse bacon or whatever you're going to call it. I think that gets confused because there's this very famous line from South Tex Gex called Bacon because it comes from a gecko named Bacon, right? So some people get upset about that. I don't, but I will say that I really like how Rack House talks about, what are we looking at here? Really, and if you read the Gargoyle Gecko book back here that I have, it's sort of the Bible of it. You've got stripe and you've got retic, and then we sort of have mosaic a little bit, which is kind of confusing because not a lot of people have that. But for the most part, it's going to be a striped animal or a reticulated animal. And then that's, the pattern that has nothing to do with color, right? Color is the pattern color is a whole different thing. So a retic that has, little spots all over it, that's blotching, right? Some people just call them blotches. And you could have a red blotch, an orange blotch, a yellow blotch, whatever it may be. And then the degree of how covered with color the animal is determines whether people call it a super or an ultra, or with this, I would consider this a 6-stripe animal because it has the 4 up top and then the 2 full laterals. Now, some people call it an animal that has a broken lateral a 6-stripe, right? There's no gecko police that are going to tell you that's not what it is, but different people have different standards for the different terminology, if that helps.
I think that's a good general way of saying that. I just wanted to address JP's concerns about sirens. Angie said that Angie is in our town, so Angie heard the siren. I don't know if everybody heard the sirens, but we had the window open because the office gets so warm, so I apologize for the sirens. But yeah, JP, the sirens are coming for you.
Well, they were threatening.
We're waiting for the officers to knock on our door.
They were threatening with ski masks and gloves a little earlier in the
They
chat.
heard I was in town. Yeah.
They're on their way.
So one thing I do want to point out that's really kind of big with gargoyles right now.
Yes.
And he's a good example of this. Is so everybody kind of knows the stripes and the blotches, but face pattern is becoming a new thing, I think.
Good point.
So if you look, what I like about him is the pattern kind of extends on the brow of his snout. I call that freckling. There's probably other terms for it. And then also along the lips, they call that lipstick, right? So right at the crease of the mouth. That is a really desirable trait. I don't, unfortunately, have any yet. This will be probably one of my next investments in genetics. But a lot of people search for eyebrows, right? So basically color right above the eyes. So the more head pattern there is, the more desirable the animal is, just because it takes a while. This is one of the last places to get full saturation. And if you're looking at some of the highest, profile geckos, a lot of them have that on it. So it's something that a lot of people are going for. And there's a lot of theories out there, which I think is cool, on how to get it right. I don't know. I'm trying to crack the code.
This is the same animal as we just saw, right?
Yes. Yeah. Just a different position.
Yep. Very cool.
So
Great
he is not to breeding
explanation.
size yet. So he's only going to get better. Same thing with this one. This is another male that I'm growing out. So that you're basically looking at my future with these two. This one is from Renee Kings at King's Dragons.
Oh.
She, Renee, she's fantastic. And what was cool about her, she's known for her stripes, right? Because she produced Pennywise, which a lot of people know from Tiki's Geckos. Produced some other animals. The more you dig into this, she just is a powerhouse. But I reached out and she had a blotch, and I was looking for something to go with Eve, my red girl. And she showed me this baby, and I just said yes immediately. I mean, this thing, I didn't know if it was male or female. Luckily, it turned out to be male for me. But this is him fired down, guys, and he's gotten better. This is a little bit of an old photo. He is, I would consider him with all the pattern, if you look at it. So you can see the base color is kind of that pale almost reddish purplish color. And it's really cool in person. It kind of drowns out in photos, but the reds, the amount of coverage there, I would call that a super blotch. So
Would describe this animal in 1 year.
In 1 year, I'm hoping that the coverage is even bigger, because that's the cool thing about blotches. Not always, but blotches tend to spread their coloration more than stripes do on average. Again, some stripes, you look them as babies and then you look them as adults. It's like, wow, you had a glow up, right? But on average, that's just going to keep kind of working its way down. You can kind of see some coloration on its head. I'm hoping that grows as well. But, it's going to look very similar. This is at about 25 grams.
Okay.
Geckos, I could show you the gecko right now. See if he's fired up. I'll bring him out just to compare.
We're going to see another gecko coming up in just a couple of minutes here that has more stripes. Now, when I've put gargoyles on my table and put something like this, maybe not this red, but something like this, it gets lost to a gecko that we're going to show in just a minute with the red stripes on white. I think people look at that contrast of the red on white, and that's what really grabs their attention. Look at that red. Oh my God. I'm going to actually try to get that.
Yeah, and again, he's fired down here, so that's a good comparison. If I can get it. Come here. There you go.
Oh, look at that.
So you see how it's spread, and I like them fired down better, but even underneath, you can see the red belly.
Look at that.
Right. This is also what I like about gargoyle geckos compared to, some of the other new cal species. Not that you can't handle obviously crested geckos are super easy to handle and you can handle chewies. I reach my hand in here, and with little kids, I never worry about cage aggression. And I know there's a lot of chewies and leechies that are not cage defensive, but I don't want to take the chance that I'll ever meet one. And I've never met a gargoyle, so I'm a wimp. I'm a big baby.
I'll share the story that this has to be 10 years now. But I had a gargoyle male. I actually had the male with a female. And I would say that they were easily in the 90s grams, maybe a little bit bigger than that. Big ones. And I don't know if you know Kyle from the Icona days. Kyle and Crystal. Yeah. So we used to do shows together, and I brought the male in to show off to Kyle, and I'm holding it for another person. Kyle's working his booth, I'm working mine. So, hey, do you have a gargoyle? And I showed this gargoyle off. I didn't realize until afterwards that I had picked up the female because they looked identical. But anyways, the female was gravid, and after holding her for about 10 or 15 minutes, she said, Wally, I've been held a little bit too long. And as I'm talking to the customer, I've got to switch screens here.
On. And they got sharp.
She grabbed me right here in the soft part of my finger, latched on and real quick and let go, just to tell me, this is enough.
Yep.
And, I only realized later that it was the female, but I put the gecko down, and my voice probably jumped a little bit when I was like, put the gecko away and stuck my hand in my pocket, talked to the customer. Eventually they purchased, maybe Christopher helped them, or they walked away. I looked at my hand, and it was full. And then after I washed my hand in the bathroom, I came back and looked, and it was a female. I was like, oh, that was silly to even bring her to a show. But
that's one cool thing that most people don't realize is they think these are frogs, right? And that they just have no teeth, and they just gum you. They've got sharp little teeth. I mean, they are the Rhacodactylus are predators, and
right.
They hunt, and it's fun to watch them hunt. But in the wild, they eat other lizards too. And so, they need those sharp teeth.
Exactly. We're going to step back about 10 steps.
Okay.
And then we're going to get back into the pictures real quick. But,
sure.
Bobby, tell us a couple of the differences between, and I feel bad that I didn't do this at the start of the show, but tell us the differences between a gargoyle and, let's take a crested gecko as an example. What are the differences?
So, to me, they're very similar, right? There's more similarities than differences, but they are different species. I think Blue River is a new brand. Did a cool little video showing the different habitats, right? I think that.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. The new food company from the UK, but they went to Newcal and kind of looked at them. So whereas the crested geckos are going to be mostly, they find them in the Isle of Pines. The gargoyles are typically found more in the more like brush areas, but also up by the mountains. So what I've noticed is that they can handle heat a little bit better than crested geckos, for sure. You can bump up their heat. Sometimes they really like the extra heat, especially if they're gravid or like my babies. I've noticed a huge difference talking to other breeders. They recommended I've had 4 or 5 different iterations of baby, tubs and things like that. I've now settled on, I've got a sea serpent rack with heat tape in the back. So I've got a heat gradient anywhere from about 77 in the back to I temp gun it, and it's around room temperature, which in my house is around 72, 71, depending if I'm trying to keep down, the AC. So a nice heat gradient, but I find the babies out all the way in the back, just digesting their food, kind of like a leopard gecko does. So that's one thing, is that they can handle heat a lot better. I've heard that they don't take bugs as easily. I've got about, 50-50 with mine, whether they'll take bugs. Have you had that experience?
I have not. I actually, it's tough to say. I'll share my experience just real quick. Cresteds love crickets. Yep. They're okay with dubias. They're okay with mealworms. I stopped feeding mealworms once they get to be about 6, 7, 8 months old. And up until that, I feed a lot of mealworms to cresteds. Anyways, my gargoyles, I feed dubias and crickets, and not mealworms, but I feel our gargoyles love both and relish, crickets just as much as dubias.
They love the protein.
Yes, they love and this is your show, it's not mine, but I'll say this.
Please. I love learning from you too.
I found that the bigger the prey item, the more they'll go after it. I picture it as, I fish a lot. I used to fish a lot. And throwing big baits for big muskies, I equate that. If I'm going to go after this meal, it better be big enough for me to sustain for a certain amount of time. I'm not just going to go after these little crickets going back and forth, but oh my gosh, it's an adult dubia. I don't know if they'll take one that big, but
a bigger one.
But a bigger one.
Your 90-gram one will.
There you go. So we have the taller deli cups, and we'll put our dubias and crickets in there. We'll dust them, put them in there, and they'll just spin around, and they'll come down off of their cork bark and grab them from there. But so that's our experience.
And I think that's a good point, that they do like bigger prey, because I have noticed that as well. The ones that will take prey, and there's a lot of great videos. You asked earlier who were some of my inspirations, and I'll kind of leapfrog into that with this answer. Jake at Red Rack, totally an inspiration as far as, gargoyles and YouTube, right? He was one of the first people to put out information on gargoyles that consistently. And so he taught a nice little video about how you peel off the insect's head and kind of get them to get used to it and stuff like that. So that was a great tip by him. And so, things like that, anything to get them to eat, some of them, and they're all individuals. And this is probably the same with all of the species, but I have some babies, like Bimini, the one that just produced that baby.
Yep.
I'm hoping the genetics pass along. She was 65 grams within a year. This girl cleaned her plate. Man, she would make any grandma proud. Okay. She was huge. And she's just been big her entire life, which I really, really like, because as we breed them more and more, and the gene pool isn't huge with any of these geckos, we have what we have. Right. A lot of the F1 genetics, which if you don't know what F1 means, it means that their parents were wild. This is the first generation in captivity. They tend to be a lot bigger, and I have an F1 female too, but she's on par with Bimini. So it's one of those things where I want that health. And so some will eat like crazy in pigs. Others, you know what? They'll lick here and there, and you won't even be able to tell. But as long as they're growing consistently and not looking malnourished and pooping, we're good to go.
Right on. How about some other differences with gargoyles? And then we're going to jump back into your pictures. And
sure. I find, again, my sample size is relatively small compared to some other people, right? But in my experience, I've owned 2 younger crested geckos that I sold off because they were so jumpy, and just even handling them. I know there's calm crested geckos. I've seen them. I've handled them. Okay. And I love crested geckos too. I'll get some in the future. But in my experience, gargoyles, especially as they get older, are just so much more chill. They're not on the level of chewies, but to me, they're a little less jumpy. And so that's one of my favorite things. So, and they kind of tell you, I don't know if crested geckos do this because I haven't worked with them as long, but I feel like they're kind of like springs. You can see when they compress and they're about to release. And so like people are like, how did you know it was going to jump? I'm like, I could tell. And even when they're like, about to jump, I can poke them on the butt and make them jump, so that's always kind of fun.
I found with gargoyles too, that you can tell when they're in good moods and bad moods. If I pick up one and it's in a bad mood, it's going to grunt at me. Crusteds don't really do that. They kind of talk to themselves. Very seldom do I have a crested gecko grunt at me, and it seems like so. Gargoyles, I know that when they're grumpy, they'll grunt, and when they don't want me to pick them up at all, when I do pick them up, they will poop on my hand. 110%.
Yes,
right.
I think that's what most of mine will do if they tell me they don't want to be handled. But I don't know. Maybe it's the trainer in me. If you poop on me, you're not getting put back, because I do not want to. I do not want to encourage that behavior, and I don't want to reinforce it. So I have a paper towels, always right over here in the corner. I will wipe it off, and I'm not going to handle them for 20 minutes after that, but you're gonna be in my hands for a little bit longer and calm down. So maybe it's just my conditioning why they're so calm, because I do start when they're babies.
That's funny. You're just a meanie. That's all that you are.
I am. I'm a consistent meanie, but I'm a meanie.
There you go. That as long as you're consistent.
Yeah.
So I think most people know about their tails, but kind of explain the whole tail thing.
Yeah. So
crusteds.
That's a big one. Why didn't I think of that? That's great.
No.
They grow back, and when they grow back, they look just like the regular tail. Now, if they're a high pattern animal, they're not necessarily going to have the exact same coloration all over the tail. But what I find interesting about gargoyle geckos is they don't drop their tail nearly as frequently as other geckos. Usually if they're going to drop it, it's because they're in a mating situation that went a little bit too rough. Or you leave babies in too long. I have a girl that I picked up that they were in an incubator together, and the breeder I got her from explained that, by the time she got to the deli cup, one of their tails was gone. Right. But one thing I do kind of realize is the color, if it is a high colored animal and they lose their tail, and one I could show off, there's some of the color starts coming back and developing later on. And so I have this one red blotch, but she's got red stripes on her tail.
Nice.
It's the coolest looking thing. So you never know. Sometimes, unlike a leopard gecko, which I've had those in the past, I am deathly afraid of them dropping their tail, because I think they're ugly as sin when that thing grows back. Yep,
absolutely. So I'll tell this real quick story, but years and years ago when I started keeping gargoyles, I made the decision to do the experiment, because everybody was saying that they drop their tails, don't keep two together. They have to be wrong. You have to feed them. More protein is the answer, folks, more protein. So sure enough, I raised like 15 pair together in tubs and moved them to bigger tubs when they got a little bit bigger. And when they were about, it's too long to remember, but like 3 months, 3.5, 4 months, go down, and oh my gosh, 2 of them are missing their tails, 2 different containers. Within like 2 or 3 days, they, one in every single container was missing its tail. I guess they were right. I was wrong.
They're way more cannibalistic.
Yes.
You don't want to just let them incubate in the enclosure and let them hatch out. Those babies will be gone before you find them.
Yes.
And again, they eat other lizards in the wild, and they don't know what's their baby. So the other big thing I noticed is that, and I made this mistake with Hawaii and Eve, because again, they were my first 2 geckos, right? And so I got an Exoterra for a Christmas gift, and my very first 1824, and I'm like, you know what? I can put them together, and they can cohab together, and they're 30 grams each. That's big enough, right? Came back the next day, and Hawaii's tail was gone. They're both fine. I separated them, and I learned my lesson. And again, the pattern on Hawaii's tail is pretty cool now that it's grown back. But what I've learned is that especially during those, they kind of have that awkward teen stage. So they've got the chunky baby stage, I call it. So you got a regular baby, then they get really chunky and they just have that pudge, right? That you just want to squeeze. Don't squeeze them, but they do it. That's pudge. And then they kind of lengthen out. They lengthen out and get really lanky. And during that phase up until they're adults, like you said, protein hungry because they're growing animals and they're just ravenous. And that's the best eating sometimes that they'll do. And I think during that phase, they're just, they'll eat anything that moves. And so that includes other geckos' tails.
100% agree with that. 100%. So we cohabitate all the time. We'll hold back and we'll introduce when they're big enough, obviously. Yeah. And occasionally we'll miss it. We'll have a tail missing, but maybe it's because we're introducing when they're a little bit bigger and past that lanky stage when they're growing so much. But,
that's a great point because once they're big enough, the adults one-on-one, I've never had an adult take another adult's tail.
We'll go through a season where and correct me if I'm wrong, Ned, we'll go through a season where we'll miss, all of a sudden one of the females or one of the males will miss a tail. And we're doing about anywhere from 16 to 20 groupings, but one, maybe two will miss a tail during the season, but they always grow back. And I never see, and this is important, folks, when I say this is the important part. Tail missing isn't a bad thing. Scars, isolation, weight loss, those are the things that you want to worry about. Not so much the tails because they grow back, but it's a sign. You have to start kind of watching them a little bit more.
It's a whole picture. And my one question to you, because I think this is important for people to realize, there's different ways of keeping gargoyles when they're adults together, right? When I first started out, everybody I knew and their mother had them in groups, right? And so there's nothing wrong with groups, but I keep mine individually and then I pair up just in one-on-one pairs. Do you guys keep them in pairs or you guys keep them in groups, if you don't mind me asking?
We keep them in pairs. No, good question. And I thought you were going, and that's a great point. And I thought you were going to even a more important point for us is that, and you probably know where I'm going. In the wintertime, ours are downstairs in the facility, but in the wintertime, our temperatures cool down and it gives the animals, both the female and especially the male, to kind of put on a little bit more weight. And I'm not thinking about breeding all the time, so I might as well eat. So during the winter, ours will maintain and actually start fattening up, and their tails will get a little bit fatter, so that in the springtime when temperatures start rising again, we're just pumping the crickets in, pump, and they're back in shape within a month, and then start the whole cycle again.
I think it's great to cool them.
We also have a ton of hiding spots in the tanks. I mean, they've got lots of places they can go to get away from each other easily.
Yeah, you need you need a she shack and a man shed for to separate for a little bit. Otherwise, they fight over who's taking out the garbage.
It's not just one spot.
Yeah, exactly. They need visual barriers. So every tank that I have, there's, even when I'm pairing them, I'll add extra pieces of cork rounds and things like that. And the males all have their own enclosure, and I'll take some cork from the male so that he feels like he has his own retreat to go back into. But I know that they're doing really well together when I find them in the same cork hollow. They don't pair bond like leechies do or chewies, but they definitely do. If they're getting along, it's a great sign to see them, kind of not snuggle, but next to each other. But yeah, real quick, I was going to say with pairs versus trios and things like that. The one thing, again, this is anecdotal. I just have heard this from enough breeders where I kind of believe it. It's not always even mating that takes away the tail. It's female on female aggression, right? The girls get competitive with each other. And so
cat fight.
Little bit. So I've noticed that might be some of the issues. But yeah, pros and cons to it all.
I almost said and I didn't. I almost said it and I didn't. I stopped myself before saying that, that girl against girl is in every species. Good night. Yeah. I'm glad I didn't say that. So, okay.
We didn't say it.
I did not say it. Thank goodness. We
didn't say it. Yeah.
No, not at all.
I'm out.
So, Laura, I'm going to share I'm out. I'm leaving. So I'm going to share Laura's point here. How long does the tail take to grow back? Then I'm going to throw my comment about the differences in just a second again.
Sure. So, do you want me to answer the grow back?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I typically, again, I've only had this happen. Well, actually, so I've had it twice with Hawaii, right? And it takes probably about 2 to 3 months to grow back fully. It'll
that's
come
not
out
bad.
as a little, no, not bad at all. It'll start coming out, obviously it looks for a day or so. You don't want to make sure that it's clean. You don't have to go and wash it or anything else like that, but just make sure that there's nothing infected. But just look at it, and then after a little bit, it'll turn black, and black's okay because the black is the new growth. And then you'll start to see a little nub start coming out that's black. And then as it comes out, it'll start getting lighter and lighter and lighter. So it looks like really a gray with black striations, the tail. And then the color will come a little bit later if it has any color at all in the regrown tail.
Yes.
The other thing that happened, other than the story I told you, why she lost it the second time, is I had a cork tube, where it had this little like V shape, and her tail, she went in it too quickly and got it caught. And so when I found the tail, it wasn't eaten. It was just caught in the cork bark. So now I check all my cork tubes to make sure that there's no traps for tails. So another little pro tip.
I'm going to add on to that too. And if you're using the little pool noodles, for goodness sake, please use the pool noodles with big center openings, so you don't have your gargoyles getting, because they're going to grow, they're going to grow, and all of a sudden they're too big for the pool noodle. They don't know.
No.
Oh my gosh, this feels so good. And then they're stuck, and you lose them for a day or two, and they can't get out, and that's bad. So anyways.
The tubes that are used for the pipes are bigger. Right, the black tube,
the black insulation.
That one, not a pool tube.
Yep, just shop around.
Here's one thing about that, though. Just one thing I do, and again, this isn't the right way of doing it, but the one thing I do, I don't care if it's cork or those tubes or whatever it is. I want to be able to get access to my geckos, right? And my hand's not that big. I'm not going to get something that's big enough for me to put my hand all the way through there, unless it's a giant piece. I purposely split the cork, so that there's a seam, so I can work, push them out with my finger a little bit. And then the same thing with the tubes, I'll actually cut a slit so that there's give every single time. They're still going to get the security of being in something enclosed, but it just makes it a lot safer and a lot easier for you to access your animals. I even in the styrofoam, I'll cut a little slit out so that there's an easier way of doing it.
Outstanding. Thank you for adding that. And then with that slit, you can just open it up. If they get stuck, you can open it up and get them out. Outstanding. Yep. I posted the differences between crusteds and gargoyles. If anybody in the chat sees something additional, one thing I thought of was the eyes are different from crusteds to gargoyles. Gargoyles have the bluish eyes. I don't know if we really see that much in crested geckos, but anybody else seeing anything, let me know. I'm going to go back to pictures real quick here. Sure. Add.
Well, one thing while I'm just thinking about it, the difference again is cresteds, they're lamellae, right? So they're CT, is it CT? I always mess that up. It allows them to stick on the glass a lot better. So gargoyles, the way that they've evolved is that they use their nails a lot more. And so you'll feel that when you hold them. And so that's why I give all of mine cork bark. And they really love cork bark. It not only helps with sheds, but it's a place to hide. It's a place that they can grip onto really well, and they feel secure. In the wild, from all the research I'm doing, and again, I would love to go there and actually, visit New Caledonia. But they're down more or less in open trees. They're down sort of in the lower shrubs and things, and they climb on sometimes smaller branches than we give them credit for. So it's kind of a cool difference, is that they don't just, you're not gonna, you find them on the side of your glass if you have glass enclosure, absolutely, but that's not usually where they are. And the pro to that is when they go to the bathroom, you don't get that leechy crusty streak down your glass. It's nice little nuggets that fall to the floor, and if you got isopods, you're good to go.
Outstanding. I'm going to jump back over to my picture here. We're going to go to the next one. Same animal.
Nope. So
No,
this
that's a different animal.
is.
Oh yeah.
So this is one of my
I can tell
females,
that.
Exuma. So Exuma is a half sibling to the girl Bimini. I'm not sure if I gave you a Bimini's photo. I'm pretty sure I did later. But Bimini's the one who created the baby that I just showed, the stunner. Exuma is the nicer younger sister, half sister. Both from Firehouse Geckos, just absolutely amazing quality animals. And she's just as big. She grew, again, within a year, she was 65 grams. I'm not breeding her this year, even though she reached size and age requirements, minimums. This is kind of a tale that you need to look at every animal individually, even if they hit like certain benchmarks. She is not ready to breed. When she started laying duds, she dropped about 10 grams. And even though, again, she's still at the right weight, I could see her hips a little bit more than I really want to. I could see her spine a little more. And so I try to feed her extra, and I make sure that I give her more time to develop so that when she does lay eggs, she's healthy.
Good call. Every animal is different.
That's Bimini. So that's the mom. So again, I picked her up at probably, I think, 10 grams, and she blew up ever since. But she's the easiest to handle. When I want to hand a gecko off to a kid or bring him to my school, she's the one. She's got a great personality. And the other thing with gargoyles, why they call them gargoyles, are those little horn nodules, those bony structures.
Good point.
And so you can see it very clearly here how, when I'm looking at animals, not all mine have the best, horns, but I really do strive for that when I'm buying geckos. And she's got fantastic horn structure. So kind of like with a crested gecko, you're looking for, that wide head. Some people like the flop. Some people really like the longer, ridges. This is something that a lot of gargoyle breeders are looking for.
How blue eye?
Yeah, how about that blue eye?
Yeah.
I love that about the gargoyles. How much? Compare it for me. Like
Sure.
You've heard crested geckos and head structure, and head structure. If you don't have head structure, you shouldn't even get a crested
you don't want a
gecko.
bald one.
Blah blah blah. How about gargoyles? Do you feel that it's the same level of, especially if you get more advanced? Oh, you have to have good head structure. You have to have the horns.
It's like 10th on the list, I think, for people. It's really not as big. Honestly, I think that it's people talk about it, I think, a little bit more, especially now that we're looking at, there's a big conversation sort of happening about, again, going back to wild genetics. They do live a long time. So we have people with wild pairs that are still producing babies. They're not as flashy red, obviously, but the structure, the wider head, just like with crested geckos, the horns, keeping them looking like gargoyles, right, is important, because I have seen bald, geckos with no hump, and they do look a little weird. I don't think that's a big issue. I think most gargoyles have pretty decent horns, but there are some that have horns that you're like, whoo, that is cool. And so, it's a little cherry on top. But I think it's something, as we move in the hobby, deeper and deeper into the genetics, it's going to be something we talk about. We're just not there yet.
I look at it as like baseball cards. You can get a nice Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, and it's spotless and clean, and edges are, and it grades at anybody that does baseball cards or any of the sporting good cards, it grades at a 9. That's going to be great for 99.99% of the collectors out there. But there's going to be that 0.001% of the collectors who go, it's a 9. Why would I want this card? I want the 10. I want the 10. So I look at the horns, not maybe that extreme, but that's that, color and this and that and size and condition, and obviously health. And now we get down to the horns. Oh, look at those horns. That's a 10 animal.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think with, I know Tiki's is doing the Gold Standard Club, with crested geckos right now. I think that's going to be one of the things, this horn structure, that he'll probably put in. Again, I haven't talked to him about it, but I can only guess.
I'm guessing too. Certainly with the crested geckos.
Yeah. So this is Exuma, the one 2 ago. But you can see even in this photo here, she's perfectly healthy. But just things that I noticed, you can see the ridge of her spine a little bit after she dropped her first eggs. So that's what I'm talking about there. So I'm being picky here. But again, I'd rather go low and slow, kind of like I do with my brisket, just to make sure it's perfect. So
check this one out.
same one.
Look
Yeah, I
at
like
the color on this.
So yeah, I mean, again, the blotches, when she was posted on Morph Market, I had just come into some money, and I just, you know, she was one I had to reach out, even though she was related to something I had. She was only a half sibling, and you know, I'm not disappointed. The one thing I like about both these girls with the blotching is this is what's considered a bicolor. So you'll see ones maybe a little bit later on that are solid red, or you know, like the first stripe we showed, it was mostly orange. This has that, you know, kind of red center, and then it kind of grows out into orange, and then it goes into the base color. That for a lot of people is one of their favorite looks. I love it. To me, it kind of looks like, you know, when you're drawing fire, right? You know, the amateur version of fire where you put red in the middle and then orange and then yellow. That's what I see it looking at, and I like the, you know, variation of color in the animal.
Beautiful animal. We've got a couple of questions coming in, and I'm going to jump over one more picture here.
Oh my, yeah. So that's a fired up picture of the gecko that was fired down the blotch. So the blotches disappear with the red on red. Red on red, either you love it or hate it, I've noticed, because of this reason, right? Some people just love contrast, right? If you're into black and white geckos, this is not the animal for you. This thing could be solid red. But yeah, so I love them.
And we're going to see an animal. Hi, Mike. We're going to see an animal coming up here that, you know, we're going to compare this animal to this. Not, I don't know if it's the next animal, but one coming up really soon here. Let's jump over one more animal.
Yeah, that's my girl Gaia. So
Okay.
Gaia's a first-year breeder. We can get into challenges in breeding first year if you want to a little bit later. But she is only dropping. She's dropping huge eggs. Like these are like massive eggs. They're infertile, even though I have her paired, and there's only one. So it's interesting. I just repaired her with a new male. We'll see if that does anything. I think, you know, it's a fun conversation, especially because your best plans never go exactly the way you expect them to. And the things you do at the last minute sometimes work out the best. So this is just another example of, you know, she's my collaboration with Southern Girl Exotics, and just hasn't panned out for me this year.
Do you, when you pair up geckos, do you expect viable eggs right from the beginning?
So with her, not her first year.
Okay.
So she laid a pair of duds. So I knew she was ready. She was size. Everything was perfect. And then when I paired those two together, I expect, you know, hopefully fertile eggs in the first clutch. But if it doesn't, I'm not discouraged. Actually, the you know, especially their first year, it's weird. It's the Wild West. Sometimes you get one egg. Sometimes you'll get, you know, I had a girl that my very first year would lay one egg and it was fertile, and that's all I got. And she never even laid again. Right. And I've had other girls where, you know, they're like you know, perfect 10 eggs right away. Some I'll get 2 perfect clutches, and then I'll get a set of duds, and then I'll get another good clutch after that. So first year, take all your expectations and throw it out the window. Pretend it's just an absolute practice year. Whatever you get, you're blessed. Okay. Year 2, you're expecting a little bit more. By year 3, you should be chugging along.
Yes.
And gargoyles lay anywhere from, I would say, 6 to, if you're having a great season, 10 clutches. You know, some maybe will lay a little bit more than that, but again, you don't want to push them. You might want to separate them just because, you know, it can get unhealthy if you're not watching them.
Yep. And I couldn't emphasize more, you know, never, you hope for the best. For us in our first pairings, we always, the crusteds are different. Crusteds and Peridor and animals like that are different. But for gargoyles or a rare gecko, when I'm first introducing, hope for the best, expect the worst. Don't expect, you know, babies' first eggs coming out. Just you hope that you can get through a couple of good lays and get, you know, acclimated to how to raise them. And then maybe after 2 or 3 lays, maybe then you should start hoping for babies. And if you get babies right from the get-go, Super
More power
cool.
to you. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talked, go ahead.
It's all about just, not setting yourself up for disappointment, because in this hobby, this is a long game. And that's one thing I do love about gargoyles is they're not as consistent. Not everybody's pumping them out, left and right, especially if you're working with higher end stuff. Not every baby comes out as a 10, So
Yep.
because of that, just enjoy the process. This is something that's going to take years. It took me years to get my first egg. And it's taken me, this was my goal. One of my very first goals was to create a 6-stripe like this. And I've been doing this for, 3 years, which isn't that long. Some people I know are 10, 12, 30 years into this, which is great, So I'm just blessed to be on the ride.
We kind of talked a little bit about this, but let's just touch base real quick on this, and then we're going to see another picture. Are there any specialty morphs out there in gargoyle geckos, like lily white, all black, etc.? We kind of talked about the traits with the blotch and stripe and 6-stripe. How about morphs?
So there are some rumored out there, nothing official yet, from my understanding. So that's Mahe again. Love that gecko. So the ones that people are talking about right now that they're trying to prove out, the hypomelanistic gene. I know that Rack House and Tiki's and Eclipse Exotics have some visuals that they're trying to prove out, whether it's codominant or recessive. We don't know yet. I actually have a gecko that I got from Eclipse that's from her pairing that produces visual hypos. So again, if it's a codominant trait, awesome. If it's a recessive trait, I'm really excited. I'm going to have to get, maybe another recessive carrier. But I just love her for who she is. She's a great red stripe. And then some people are talking about the Clown Project, which is more of a pattern trait that it has sort of like loops and circles on the side. I've never seen one in person. I've seen some pictures. Again, Kylie at Gargoyle Queen has a great website that breaks down color and pattern and morphs to a really degree, which I give her credit for putting all that information out there. So she took some great time doing that.
The hard part is that, when we talk about morphs, that's a solid, genetic verbiage that we should, and you're doing a great job of this, Bobby. It's something very, very specific, and we can't get, the verbiage of traits confused. Morph is a very specific genetic thing, and traits are not as genetic. It's more of a line breeding. When we talk about
polygenic,
it's polygenic. When we talk, in that degree, we're talking about more reds, or we're talking about more yellows. We're talking about super hypo tangerine carrot tail leopard geckos and more orange. Well, let me breed mom to junior here and get more orange in the tail. That's
right.
Right. So we've got to be really specific with that.
And that's one thing, when you're dealing with polygenic traits, I know a lot of people would be tempted, right, to inbreed or line breed their animals, which are different things, guys. So if you don't know, inbreeding is taking, basically think of immediate family, right? Your parents, that's inbreeding, right? Your siblings. Line breeding is, okay, you're a few, it's your aunt, right? So still related, to try to really hone in on that color or that specific look. Think of the Targaryens in Game of Thrones, right? They all had that hair, silver hair, right? That was inbreeding. Anyway, so yeah, it's one of those things where it's very tempting. But I would say from everybody I know, especially any of the more seasoned people in this hobby, it's very frowned upon. People want to know lineage for their gargoyles, especially because if you're willing to put down $1,000 plus on an animal, I want to know where it came from. So,
right on. Julie's asking, how many do you? We kind of talked about this, but how many do you have roughly currently, and are they housed in the basement or some other place?
They're spoiled. They're upstairs. I've got a little loft above my wife's office, so I've not been given a bedroom. I do have space in the basement, but my basement, again, because gargoyles like a little bit more heat, it's easier for me to keep them at the temperatures I need on my top floor. And so I took them out of my basement. How many I have? Again, currently, if I want to say older holdbacks and adults, I've got 15 abouts, and then babies, I've got about the same. So I've got about 30 geckos right now, which I only really want to have about 14 adults at any time. So she's an F1. This is a girl I picked up at Tinley. Yeah, she's from 402 Exotics. They have a really nice grouping of wild caught gargoyles, right? And stripes, blotches, it's a whole hodgepodge, and they keep them in a group, and they're all doing really well, but they're producing some big babies. Now she's a female and not nearly as big, even though females can get big. But I've seen some of her full siblings, and some of them are those 75 plus gram geckos. So, but for her being an F1, someone might look at this and go, yeah, compared to the other ones we just looked at, this isn't as pretty. This is not anything special. I disagree, just because if you looked at the parents, they had no color, none whatsoever. And it's crazy how with gargoyles, I'm noticing within a generation or two, you can put on a ton of color, right? And so for her to have this much color, I paired her up to a high color male, and I'm really excited. Their babies are about to hatch in about 7 days, if I'm accurate.
Here's the thing. You don't know what's behind the curtain. I'll relate it to Periodor Picta. When I started with Periodor Picta, I started with years and years ago, I started with a handful and then brought in different genetics and everything. Then I got out of Periodor Picta. We got back into it about 6 or 7 years ago. And I actually went to one person. I said, I want a dozen wild animals. Well,
Yeah.
we have some, F1s. I want wild animals. I bought a dozen and paired them up as far as color. This is kind of close as at this point now, 6 years later, I have reds and I have whites and I have 3 stripes and you don't know what's behind the curtain with these. This one could have, I'm going to say it, I'm going to say the A word. This one could have albino behind it. We don't know. That's right. We don't know. So
right.
I think
So
that's the cool
don't
thing about
discount them.
bringing in the wild.
It is. And we're not getting them from the wild anymore. So, anybody who has those pairs knows, anybody I've talked to who has those pairs knows what they have, right? And unless they're getting out of the hobby, good luck trying to wrangle the wild ones from them. So the best that you're going to do typically is an F1, right?
Right.
And so, I'll have F2 babies, which again will be genetically way more
Yellow.
diverse than what you're going to find normally. So
Pretty.
just something I'm trying to interject into my breeding, just to stay ethical, But again, these animals live a really long time. So when I'm saying, these are my building blocks, I always think of, I'm not going to be turning these geckos over every 2 years, right? And switching this one with that one. I'd rather buy once and buy big, and then just, have my babies get attached.
JP, right on. Or you could, this one could produce babies that have cave gecko red, devil eyes. You don't know.
Never know.
You really don't know.
Did you see the melanistic Chihuahua at Schaumburg?
I saw that one about a year ago, and Ryan kind of said, I'm going to show you this, Wally, but hush, hush, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, don't say anything.
Yeah.
And JP and I actually, we were together, and Ryan pulled them out, and we were playing with them, and all kinds of questions. Ryan, how about this? And genetic wise, so we were fortunate to have about JP, about a half hour with Ryan, and talk through the genetics of those. So when we talk about melanistic, that is I'm going to swear here. Sorry.
Don't.
That is a melanistic animal, and I'm sure you saw it. It is black.
JP came and told me afterwards, so I had to run over.
Oh.
Is that what makes it melanistic, the black?
Melanistic is without color. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's high melanin, right? So
Yes.
The darker the animal and everything, and it just accentuates that. And it's coming out in other species, right? So you've got melanistic lychees already out there. We've just seen the chewy, and then I even heard that there's Eurodactyloides velardi that we've produced melanistic versions of, which is really exciting because you want to talk about a sleeper animal. If there's colors in a chameleon gecko, right, those are going to blow up. I'm predicting it right here.
I've got to say you're probably right with that one, especially something so small like that.
So that's the male I paired her to. So this gecko here is Fiji. I really love, that's another trait that gets overlooked but not super important, but I think it's a plus, a little extra thing, is the eye rim color.
Yeah,
right? So he's a red gecko, and then he's got that yellow eye rim.
Mm-hmm. And toes.
Yep.
Did you do that yourself with like paint pens or something?
Highlighter, permanent highlighter. So
little David Bowie look, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Very cool.
You want to talk about a gecko that likes to poop on you? This is the one.
Oh no.
Yep. So this is the one I got from Eclipse. Female. I love her just because of her saturation. If you can zoom into her face a little bit, she's got the lipstick, she's got freckling, she's got a little bit of head splatter. I really think that it grows with every generation, the head color. So you pair high head color to more high head color. I'm not saying that's how you get eyebrows or anything else like that, but I think it's just something to stack on each other. But this is the potential hypo somewhere in there. Maybe, who knows? I'm just happy that I have her. Clearly she's not a hypo, but she does, when that's her fully fired up, by the way. That's what I think is cool. So whether it's a co-dominant gene that when the super form comes out, it actually looks hypo, and she's maybe a co-dominant, I don't know. But I'll let them figure it out with their collections. But when she fires down, she is paper white and red, and it's so cool.
I like what you're saying also with this is, we're looking at a trait here, maybe genetics, we're not sure, but what you're also saying is she also has this and this and this. Are those tells? Are they something that we can now, I'll give it a real quick example with my red crusted geckos. When I hatch something out and I raise it up to about 2 or 3 months old, I know it's going to be a super red. I shouldn't say super red. I know that the reds are going to be more intense if it does have the white lipstick. That's just such a huge tell for me. So
you start to pick up on those things.
Yes.
And actually, if you can go back one real quick, I'll share one with you guys.
Sure.
So if you zoom into her stripes, one thing that I've talked about on my podcast, but I think it's important to point out, do you see how jagged those lines are?
Mm-hmm.
The more jagged the lines are, I find that those are not defined, so they spread like the blotches. And a lot of them have blotch genetics in them that if they're like that. The ones where it's a crisp line, like it looks like someone drew it on, even as a baby, maybe they'll fuse together next to each other, but to spread downward, I don't see that happening very much. So that's one thing when I'm looking at babies, what's the potential for these to grow a little bit and to spread the coloration with every shed? I think that's kind of a cool thing.
I'm gonna see if I can grab that. Great point.
Yeah, it's my happy girl. Again, when they gape at you, they're not smiling. They're telling you just put me away, which put them away.
I'm done.
Can you zoom into the teeth there? Actually.
Oh yeah, show us the teeth. Oh wow, look at them.
I'm going to see if I can do this the right way.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can see that. Everybody see that?
It's so cool.
So picture this animal about 3 times as big and grabbing Wally's, finger, the sensitive part of my dainty hand.
That's like 15 grams.
Just ripping a piece right off. So this one's 50?
15.
Oh, 15. Okay.
Yeah, 15 grams in that photo. She's bigger now. I've actually got this one up for sale. But this is the one that I bought with a tail that is regen. And if I had, again, I have to make these tough calls. And this is what's hard about not growing so big, is that she's a keeper. She's an absolute keeper. She's gorgeous. She comes from great lines if you see her parents. But I don't have a purpose for her, realistically looking, now that I've shifted a few things. And so, if I'm only going to keep 10 females, she's got to fit into that plan and that vision. So
Yes.
that's why sometimes you can get really good deals on with people for stuff that they would keep. They just, it's not working for them.
Jennifer says that she hand feeds hers and she gets bit occasionally. Frank is saying, it is Shark Week, so
Well, I think they look like little alligators, don't they? Especially, that's the other thing too. With we talked about head structure. Part of the head structure is the longer snout, right? I've seen
Look at
some
those
that have
two.
really short snouts,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
almost like a
yeah.
bulldog, brachycephalic, not to that extent, but like that's one thing that's more desirable is gargoyles should have a longer snout. Now we can go extreme the other way, but yeah.
Julie's telling me just leave them alone. You silly boy, you just leave them alone.
Yeah.
Oh, look at the back
That's a
in this
cool
one.
one. Look at that.
That is my Schaumburg pickup. from
Oh,
Curious
congratulations.
Creatures. Thank you. Oh man. I'm walking around Friday. Friday was really slow. And it was my very first show. So I've been to Schaumburg before. It's 20 minutes away from my house. And so I'm walking around and I'm visiting one of my favorite booths, which is Curious Creatures, because they were my original reptile store. When I lived downtown Chicago, what really got me back into bearded dragons and all these animals after college was their store. Gorgeous. They take care of those animals, and they've got Ackies and all these other cool things. So I'm talking to the owner, Allison, and I just have to look at the Gargs, and some were okay and some were better than. And then I saw this one, and I'm like, wait. I'm sorry. I know you guys are setting up. I'm going to interrupt you and make you an offer on this animal. And she's like, ooh, that's, her husband, Andy, who runs it with her. They've been on my podcast. She's like, that's his favorite. And, he's not going to take a dime less than what we're asking. And I go, give him a call. Tell him it's me. And we worked it out right then and there. So they are amazing. And beautiful. This thing, yeah. So you can see even there, it's got crisp lines, but you can kind of see the blotching on the side. That it shows me it's going to spread a little bit. The horns there on it are phenomenal. And it's in the lanky stage that I was talking about. But the lipstick on here almost goes to the front. It's got a little speckling. And this is fired down, guys. This is a red-based animal. So as it develops, the red bases take a long time to come in.
I think
and that's what's hard. Yeah, it's hard because it takes about a year and a half for them to all of a sudden you'll walk in and you'll know it's a red base, but to see that glow of the red base. I remember the first time my girl Eve, I walked into the gecko room, and it was at night, and I flashed my camera. I had my camera light on, and I'm just like, that's not my gecko. That is not my gecko. That is phenomenal. And I nearly, jumped up right there and woke everybody up. But yeah, that's one thing, guys. If you have geckos, go out at night. Look them at night.
It's fun because it gets you excited about the whole hobby all over again.
Yep. It was like I got a new toy, just that day. So, and then, with any of these, lineage is huge too. This one here is a little bit more orange, but its mom is insane and it's orange. This one's from Koala Geckos. I'm really excited for her. I just paired her with the male that produced the baby that I showed earlier. And just if you see, you guys go on Morph Market, look at Koala Geckos. He's got some amazing deals right now going on, and he's doing an auction on one that I want to grab. But the one that's the highest price, just look at that, is a half sibling to this. And I'm really excited to see if I can produce what he produced. So, and this one looks a lot like the mother. So I'm excited.
Julie's hitting at me saying orange because she knows
orange,
that orange is the color. Orange is the new everything.
And I see that with gargoyles. Orange, because everybody has been so, if it has stripes and it's red, it's going to sell. That's what I've always heard, right?
Yes.
But I think we're getting to the point where red is last year's color. Not yet. It's still this year's a little bit, but I think enough people are seeing how bright orange is, right? It's a different experience. And I think it's hard to come by because a lot of oranges turn red. So that's why I'm kind of excited about some of my geckos staying orange.
Yes. And I'm going to ask you about the gargoyle market in just a minute. where you see it going. But how about this one?
This is Eve as a baby. So this is when I picked her up. So what you'll notice here is, she's not bright red, right? She's fully fired up, and I'm in direct sunlight. She's got that orange, like the baby I just showed you, right? One thing I'm going to say though is not always, but again, the darker the base color looks as a baby, the higher likelihood, in my opinion, is going to be either an orange base or a red base, just some kind of colored base. The other telltale sign that I heard a while back, Mike, I forget it might be Mike Walsh, told me this. If you look at the belly of gargoyles, right? If you see kind of a zigzag, horizontal pattern, that can also be an indicator of a colored base, which is kind of cool. I don't know the validity of that, but it's just another thing to look at when you're buying babies. I've asked breeders, hey, can I see the belly of your gecko in a photo? And they're like, this guy's nuts. I'm not, So
Mike's been in it long enough that, when he says something, I know I certainly listen. So I'm going to go back. Bear with me. Okay, you've seen this gecko. Everyone see this gecko? Take a look at this gecko.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do the old eye test. Is it better here or here? Which one does everybody like?
Is that the same?
The
gecko?
fully red or this one? I want to comment in the comments here in the chat. Do you want the stripe or do you want the full? Stripe or full? What, Nanette?
Stripe.
Nanette goes stripe. Yeah. Everybody, let's get some votes in here.
Contrast. I like the
and
white.
Again, it's contrast versus full, right? Because you can get a red on red stripe or a red on red blotch, or you can get, stuff like this either way. She's paper white. This is Kovic, and she's produced some of my best babies. Anybody who follows me, you ever see RAKA, Raka, people call them. I've got 8 Raka babies right now. She's awesome. So she's from Birds and Beasts as well.
Okay. Yeah. And there is no right or wrong answer here whatsoever. This is your taste. This is if you do like the reds, don't like the reds, like yellows, like orange, like whites, like black. Doesn't matter. It's just it's so interesting that these two animals are so different. If you were to say, Bobby, in the hobby right now, which is more popular, and I hate to even use that word, but
desirable,
I guess, maybe. Which one is more desirable?
Contrast.
Yeah,
100% contrast.
Just because
it catches people's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very polarizing, like you said. Because of my second gecko turning bright red, and I can see the value in having a red on red gecko. I get to see her. I think pictures don't do them justice.
Yes.
Solid color ones.
Yeah.
And again, that's why sometimes I like seeing them fire down, because I get that contrast, but with a different contrast, right? It's red and purple versus red and white, or orange and whatever.
Yeah, they're both fantastic animals. Fantastic. We've got JP saying stripe, Julie stripe, Cassandra saying full, and Jennifer says normally the first. I think that's the full.
Stripe.
Is that the stripe?
Was the first one you showed.
Both incredible animals. Incredible. So
that's
another one.
That's red on red stripes, right? So yeah, that's a even better comparison than this one and the last one. And this is in full sunlight, no editing. This is actually on my iPhone. This isn't even a DSLR. Okay, guys, I think it was last generation's iPhone. So this was just one of my favorite days, seeing her out in the sunlight.
Yeah.
So yeah,
incredible. Look at that.
Yeah, and even within a red on red animal, you can see, like you said, kind of the white lips a little bit.
Yep.
And then just the amount, if I was a painter, the amount of oranges and reds and burgundies and whites, that I would have to put into this photo to recreate this. It's not just red. It's every scale has a little, it's like dot art, So
I think these are, this is black.
Yeah, that's
So
black there.
I think you should work with this and bring out the black. I can say that facetiously. So
Yeah.
very cool animal.
Thank you. So this was if you remember, one of the very first animals, the orange one.
Yep.
This is Kahuna at 3 grams, right?
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah,
My
I knew
gosh.
he was going to be special. And I got in here with my DSLR and, took this photo, and I was just blown away. You can't even see it this detailed with the naked eye. The macro zoom I had was phenomenal.
For our thumbnail, I thought about using this picture because it is such a great picture, but I wanted something a little bit, stand out, more outstanding, I guess. So it was a tough choice. Beautiful.
The red on red does that, guys.
There you go.
My very first baby I sold at Schaumburg, they fell in love with the red on red, and I only had one baby available from her, and they snatched it up. This is Hawaii. Again, she was my first keeper gecko. And I love, again, she kind of stays that yellow orange, right? And I have her paired to a red male just because I don't have a yellow male at this quality. So I call him my ketchup and mustard line. But she's a sweetheart. Can you zoom into her tail? Do I have it in the photo?
Let me see if I can.
A little bit.
Hopefully.
It's curled, but you can see how it's actually spotted. So that's the regen tail.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's gray, but then spotted, and it has some orange speckles if you look close. But yeah.
So this is the mustard one. I think you should change the name to, pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon?
Grey Poupon. That's awesome. So here's a great example of the waves on the bottom that Mike was talking about a while back. So this is Eve again, same gecko. Now, as she's bred, she kind of gets that little bit darker red burgundy coloration, but she's still bright underneath. And so I'm going to breed her next year. If Mahe is up to size, I'm going to do red on red versus red on red. So those babies better be red on red.
So because Anthony is saying super blotch all day for me, I'm going to say stripe for me, just to be contrarian. Yeah, I have to. After victory.
Oh, man. Yep. And then you saw this male a little bit earlier. This is the male I'm going to be pairing to my F1 female. It got eggs already. But, it's kind of cool. What's interesting here is when I started breeding him, the color, you can see it's kind of yellow on the body, the base color. The face drained of color. I don't know what she's doing to him at night, but he just, it's almost like he's got like a lighter colored head. It's so cool in person. I don't know if it's picking up there.
It's very, very, it certainly is. It's very different. Wow.
Yeah, that's Kahuna again.
Beautiful.
So I can't get enough of him. And that's Proslin. So he's the dad who made the baby I showed earlier. I'll show you another one of his babies just real quick while you got him.
Sure, yeah, please.
Just because the clutch mate to the one I showed earlier doesn't have that bright red. It's got more of the traditional yellow orange. Gotta be careful with these day-old babies. All right. So, see if I can get it. Yeah, see if I can show you this. So again, a lot less saturation, but you can see the stripes there. Right? And that's a full sibling. Actually, it looks like it's still got a shed, so I'll leave it alone. But just something a little bit different. But I'm just very, he's my main breeding male this year. I actually got him from Canada.
Really?
Yeah. So fun story. And this is where, talking to people, you can get the lineage on these geckos, right? And so there was someone, I believe they were getting out of gargoyles up in Canada. I saw it on one of the Facebook groups. And what was cool about it is I reached out. It was in my budget. It was the most I ever spent on a gecko at the time. Won't say exactly how much, but it's not insane today in my mind. And he was already a little bit older, knew what I was getting, reached out to him, made the deal. He gave me free shipping from Canada, which I've never heard of. Right. I ended up buying another gecko from him just because of that. And then I go, so where did you get this thing? Right. Did you produce it? And I'm gonna butcher the name. I always feel bad. Is it Burgies or Burgies? Geckos. Do you know? I don't.
Yeah,
She's
I
awesome.
know. I can see the name.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one it is.
No, sorry if I butchered it, but one of the best blotch breeders and apparently stripe breeders too in the game. Talk about someone when I started off that I admired. So she's great, and it came from her in the United States. So this gecko was produced in the United States, shipped to Canada, grown up in Canada, shipped back to me. So,
Unreal.
It's got its own passport.
That's crazy. I'm going to show one more here.
Sure.
Let's see if I can do this. There we go. So you bought the I have a question about, well, not so much a question, more of a point. You purchased the Gecko Friday. Were you excited? Because I actually, you don't know this, but I was there and I had my camera out. And when you worked out that deal and there was a confirmation, I actually, believe it or not, I caught a picture of you.
Yep.
You were so excited. Yeah, I flipped it, flipped the lens and caught the picture. So,
oh man, that's the first pull-up I've done in years. Oh man, did I look young there? That
awesome. Reminds me. Somebody asked me if I could do 10 pull-ups. I said, sure I can. I said, okay, let me see you do 10 pull-ups. I said, well, not all in a row.
Right. Yeah, you got to get that assist machine.
Yeah, so maybe over a month.
Schaumburg, this is my very first show I ever vended. I watched your videos just to see, any tips or tricks, and a lot of other YouTube videos. The actual display, I had a blast making.
That is so cool. So cool.
Thank you. If you guys want to see a close-up after this, go to JP's video. He just posted on YouTube. He did a great job.
Nice.
This is just awesome.
So I had some foam left over from a build. I did a rock wall, 3D rock wall for my first my bearded dragons, and then I actually after I sold the bearded dragon, got collared lizards for a hot second. And but I watched. You guys know, or you've seen it, Tanner from Serpent Designs.
Yep.
All of his builds.
Yep. Amazing.
One of the best ones I watched was this one that he did a bioactive bearded dragon. So I took all those skills that I learned from that, built my own background, and then this is the leftover material I had from a few years ago. I just went to my basement. I go, I have no money to buy an enclosure, and I don't want to just display. Yeah. I don't want to go and just put deli cups on a table. Right? It's not to me. You could do it, but I just thought I don't have enough animals. I only have 10 animals, so I got to stand out somehow. And
you did.
I thank you.
You did.
I just got super creative, and I remember going downstairs and remembering how much I hated tearing apart the foam, because when you're using a bit to basically shred away pieces and make it look like rock, it's dust. You got to wear a mask. It's everywhere. It sticks to you. So cleanup is half the work. But yeah, and then trying to create that water, that was fun. I actually so after I dug it out, I'm like, okay, I've got the general shape, but how am I going to go, and I can spray paint it blue. That's an easy decision. But how am I going to make it look like water? Right? So I watched all these tutorials from like figurines and all the different composites and things I could put in there, acrylics. And finally I'm like, I don't have any money. So I went to Home Depot, and on sale, half off, was the can of Flex Seal, and it said clear. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to try it. So that's just a can of Flex Seal. Just
unbelievable.
So
can you zoom into that again?
Yeah, the display looks really cool. I want you to talk about the deli cups.
Yeah.
And why in the world, Bobby, are you not showing off your animals? I mean, that's the whole reason for you to bring animals to a show. Why don't you show them?
I'm ashamed of them. No, I honestly, I love stealing ideas from people that are smarter than me, right? And I cannot take credit for coming up with the concept. I can take credit for tweaking it to make it mine. But Carl from South Tex Gex, if you've ever seen him at any of his shows or at Tinley, he came up with this ingenious idea to go and have his best animals in an acrylic display with a black hinged lid on top, right? And so what that does is it keeps the animals calm. But also, if you know anything about if you put animals in a dark, humid environment, if you're getting wanting to get a good picture of them fired up, that's how you do it, right? And so basically, with their, it was completely enclosed as you put the deli cup into the display there. And so the top, I didn't want to shine lights on them for 3 days and freak them out and have them all washed out.
Yep.
And nobody liked my animals. So I'm like, I don't have enough money to buy acrylic tops for all these, but I do have a printer and I do have some card stock from when I actually, applied to jobs. So I just went and got creative and went on to, Canva, made the images and put the animals parents on it. So I didn't, some people suggested I put the animal, like the best picture I have of each gecko on the front, which is a great suggestion. My thought though was, have you ever been to a fish swap or a fish expo? Like when you're looking at like the African cichlids, the babies that you buy look nothing like the adults, right? Otherwise, you're just buying a little gray fish. And so what they do is they put a picture of the parents, or at least a representation in their case, of what they're going to turn into. And I love that idea because people want to know what they're buying a year from now, not what it looks like right this second. If I know I can show the lineage there, if people want to ask, hey, they're on top. So if you liked a certain pair, you can see exactly which babies they've produced. And so I also put little tabs to make it easier to lift up and down, which solved my first gen issue when I just put a circle on them because I would crease them in the middle. So I took the tabs, put my logo on it, and you could lift them up. And for the most part, they stay fired up. There was one gecko that did not fire up for 3 days. And I'm like, I use it as the example of this is the one that's going to prove me wrong. But that was my thought process. I wanted to keep them calm. I don't have a ton of animals. If I had 200 animals on a table, I couldn't do this. But with under a dozen, I could take the time to custom make these.
I like this idea a whole lot. And in fact, I want to figure out a way I can incorporate this into what we do. We usually bring, I don't know how many cups, 100 cups. So, I'm thinking maybe for a half dozen or a dozen animals specifically, we could do something like this. I love this. Tell me about maybe at 12 o'clock, maybe 12:15. There's one without a tab.
I stole those off my son's birthday cake. I'm not kidding. So my son's obsessed with animals too. Go figure. And you ever seen the show Wildcrats?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that was his birthday theme. And when I picked out his cake, I purposely went and made them put palm trees so I could incorporate into this. So
unbelievable. Outstanding.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the one cup just above that doesn't have a tab.
Yep.
It doesn't have a tab because
there wasn't a gecko in it. So that one, basically anything that just needed to be filled, I didn't want to just random holes.
That's his logo.
So yeah, I just put my sticker. I put one of the absorbing, inserts on top just to make it uniform looking, and then my sticker. But you'd be surprised how many people went and picked it up anyway. Just to double check. They want to make sure they didn't miss anything. Which, I think one thing people could look at this and say, well, Bobby, they're not going to, if you can't see the animal, they're not going to be drawn to your table. Well, it's drawn in a different way. And I took the advice of other people and said, I'm never going to sit down. I'm literally going to go, and I don't know if you even heard me say this, be like, hey, you want to play peekaboo? Check what's underneath the tabs, or you want to check under the hood. And so I was always reaching out to people, even if they weren't gecko people, just to say, hey, let's play a game together. Let's start a conversation. And it worked really well. I think especially children love this almost too much, where they almost broke it. But it's a good thing I'm good with kids. But yeah, so that was fun.
If you did this, Bobby, I'm going to steal this idea and I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm under one of these cups. I'm going to put like a toy, and when the kid, right? If you find the toy, it's yours. You only get one chance. Yeah. So I love this, and I don't think that you're stealing it at all. I think that as a community, if we're so concerned about somebody stealing our ideas, you got to think again, because that's why we're doing this. We're putting stuff on our table to hopefully work. And if it works, people are going to get it and they're going to come in and try to mimic. So flattery and all. So I'm going to give you the most flattery and
thank you.
Compliments. And I'm going to try something like this with a couple of cups of ours.
And I am flattered because, if anybody thinks that any of my ideas are worth, replicating, that's the best flattery possible. So I am not one to hoard ideas or get upset. Please, anybody watching this, if I go to a show and I see this, you're going to make my day. I'm not going to be upset.
There you go.
So. Bobby, I just want to tell you, it was really cool to see it because I was one of those that came up and Wally was talking to somebody else at the time, and you did do the Let's Play Peekaboo, and Crystal and I were looking at them. Awesome. It was really cool. You were extremely engaging, and for being somebody that's done your first show, I would not have believed that was your first show. You were very engaging, and with anybody that came up, and it was really cool to see. Also, the animals, the pictures that we've seen tonight are nothing compared to what he actually had at the show. The color was so much more vivid at the show. I was very impressed with the whole thing. Very nice.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Very nice.
Every word. You guys did a great job, Bobby. Your animals were smoking hot.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And I'd be amiss if I didn't take a second, if you don't mind, and just shout out. The only reason why I was able to do the show was because of Nelson from NCG Reptiles. He was, his display is behind me in this photo, but we worked beautifully together. He's been on my show. I think I'm not sure if he's been on your show. If he hasn't, he needs to be. And he had a really cool animal, the spear point leaf-tailed geckos. Mm-hmm. That those I'm surprised I didn't take some home. If I wanted to buy more crickets, I would have grabbed a pair. But I mean, just talk about an underrated species that just drew people in. Yeah, he's got some crazy stuff going on, and I'm really, I'm honored to be working with him. So.
And we would be honored to have Nelson on our show talking about the Ebonawis and what he's doing. He's doing great things. All those cups behind you, Bobby, are Ebonawis, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And for somebody to have that many babies is just incredible. We definitely will talk to Nelson. I wanted to point out again, Nelson has a great YouTube channel. You have an outstanding YouTube channel.
Thank you.
I'm surprised people don't turn my channel off because they can't understand some of the words that I pronounce. You have a voice made for radio and for YouTube.
And a face made for radio.
No. I joke about me. Doggone it, you jumped the gun on me. Seriously, though, you do a great job. And I'm going to repeat what I said before, and it's all the enthusiasm that you bring to the hobby. And none of it is... I don't see 1 ounce of me against that person in what you're doing, and that's admirable. So hats off to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this isn't a competition hobby. This is a community that and I've had some amazing people reach out. Once I started the YouTube channel, it's always something I would be on. Coaching from the couch, right? Watching stuff like that you produce and be like, if I could only do that. And I jumped in. Mimicking someone else, right? So Sick Reptiles did a little hand video, and I'm like, I could do that, right? I could try it, and he does it way better than I did it. But it was just my recommendation is everybody watching this that has a passion for something, put it out there. It's not going to be perfect the first time. It's not going to be perfect the 10th time. But you were not doing it to get popular. We're doing it to share our love of things, and if you do that, people will resonate to it. And I've had a lot of people reach out and just say, thank you so much for bringing light onto a species that doesn't get enough, love. And that's one of the biggest compliments, because that's why I do it, right? I don't do it I don't post every Tuesday at 5 so that I get 1,000, followers. And, I don't make any money from this. I think YouTube owes me $100 and I haven't collected yet. So, it's one of those things where, I just have fun. And when I'm not, if I'm not passionate about a certain video, I don't make it. And, so I'm sporadic, which I apologize for, but it's just when you do get something from me, hopefully, like you said, I really appreciate you saying that you can see how much I love this hobby.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. It's, you will never, unless you're somebody like Dave Kaufman, you're never going to make money because the time that you invest in in doing this, you're not going to get back. And a lot of times it's with the reptiles as well. I've got two other questions here, and they relate to each other. One is from JP. I guess I do have a question. Are you planning on working with other reptiles? And Angie has a great question that I said that I would ask earlier on, and then I completely missed. Do you have a next goal in mind?
Yes. All right. Well, let me start with JP's question real quick.
Yeah.
Yes, but not if my wife has something to say about it. You know. Yeah. I mean, I want to first branch out into something that's similar, that the care is similar. So you're probably going to see first a chewy or a crested gecko or something that I see a vision with, right? I was not looking for crested geckos, but I posted a little bit earlier. There was a crested gecko that, well, actually, I was talking to somebody about trading a chameleon gecko, right? I won't say who, but I was going to trade one of my chameleon geckos for possibly a chewy, and they're like, well, what do you like? What's your style? And I love the bright green chewies. I mean, the white collars are great, but I don't have 20 grand. Okay. Not that they all cost 20 grand, but, and they're like, oh, I have a green one for you. And they come out and it's a green crested gecko. And I don't mean a little bit green. I mean, this thing was green and the back was solid yellow, goldish color. It was a harlequin with gold, you know, you can go look it up on my Instagram. But this thing was just so cool and it blew me away. And that's the feeling I wanted if I'm going to jump into another species, is that when I open these drawers, I said this so many times throughout Schaumburg, but when I have a breeder and I know I'm going to keep it, if I don't open the drawer and go, holy cow, every time I do that, it's not the animal for me. And that's why I think that's the way I'm going to stay reasonable and keep my quality up.
Nice. I love that answer. Keep the passion running, keep the fire burning.
Yeah, because these animals live 20, 30 years. We don't know really.
That's right.
Next goal in mind. So the next thing I would like to add to my collection for gargoyles, trait-wise, we talked about head color. So eyebrows would be something that I would love. And the other big thing would be, if you've seen, some of them have a solid back where the four stripes merge together so much that there is no black line down the center. There is nothing but color. You know, that I think would be a phenomenal addition to my genetics.
Outstanding. Do you think you have the animals in your collection right now to do that?
I don't know. I'll find out. I think I possibly do, just because I don't think we understand gargoyle genetics as well as we think we do.
Right.
So, I mean, I've been surprised this year. And I'm just going to have fun with it. And if it pops out, great. If not, I know some fantastic breeders that I'm eyeing that have something like that. And, you know, I can always save up. So I just need to sell some babies and, you know, create a little pot of gecko money.
There you go. Nanette has a question for you. I can't read your writing, Nanette, so you're going to have to read the question yourself.
You started earlier to ask him and then you stopped, and it was, where did he see the future of gargoyles going?
Oh yeah,
was that what you asked?
Where are we going to be in 5 years, Bobby?
You started and then you stopped.
It depends on what happens later this year. I won't go down that route. But in seriousness, I think that the economy has a big impact, right? And I'm not going to get political here at all, but I think, you know, everything's more expensive these days. And when I saw Schaumburg not as well attended as the year before, right? I was not a vendor, but just talking to other vendors, everything, whether it's geckos, food, anything like that, people are a little bit tighter with their wallets. And and they're more purposeful, which is, I guess, is a good thing. But I think in 5 years, I'm hoping the economy picks up. I'm hoping that, you know, other people, not just myself, will jump on the gargoyle bandwagon. If someone else wants to make a bigger gargoyle YouTube channel than mine, I would love it. I'll binge their content, you know, and help them out in any way I possibly can. I think that for me, I think the hobby can only grow, especially if we start to get some morphs, right? I think that would be huge. I think some morphs are coming down the pipeline. And just like with crested geckos, once lily white hit the market, I mean, things kind of blew up a little bit. So I'm hoping that's the case too with gargoyles, because I think, unless you absolutely hate the look of a gargoyle, they're just as cool as crested geckos, if not cooler for some people.
1,000% agree. I've always said, with any of my crusteds on the table, if I had a red gargoyle, it really stood out just as well as the crested gecko. So 100% agree.
Yeah.
You saw what happened with crested geckos, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And then again, 4 years ago. And same thing can happen with gargoyles. Absolutely. Because we don't have our hands around, the absolutes with the gargoyles just yet. But I think it's coming.
That's where I think there's potential, right?
Yep,
because
absolutely.
we don't have the morph rushes right now, right? If you're looking to get into something that has the potential to be where you're going to put your name on the map because you're the first one that came out with this or discovered this, gargoyles have a lot of potential there, right? And so that could be something. Just because you made me think of it, I'm going to just jump in real quick and answer a question you asked before.
Yeah.
I kept giving examples of differences between crested geckos and gargoyles.
Yeah.
One of the biggest ones and why I love them for this, especially the reds, we talked about base color versus pattern color, right?
Yeah.
Their base color will fire up, fire down, change. Same thing with a crested gecko. But the red in a crested gecko is their base color. Right. And so how many people say, I love my red crested gecko. He never fires up or she never fires up. It's pink. Right. Most of the time. And that's frustrating. Right. With a gargoyle, that red is always that red. That pattern color stays. So whether they fire up or fire down, you got a blazing red gecko. Right. And maybe it's a little more contrast sometimes. But that is one thing I absolutely love is the pattern color stays, whether it's fired up or fired down.
Great point.
That was a good point.
Great point. I'll add that as number 5 on my list.
There you go. Yep.
Anything and any other questions while you ask in the chat, Bobby? Anything else that I forgot to mention? I mentioned YouTube. Everybody after this show, don't do it now, but go to GECKO COVE and subscribe to Bobby's channel. A wonderful, wonderful channel. Great interviews. Love to watch his interviews. Go out and subscribe to.
I think you've been on there too, right?
I
think you've been on the podcast too.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. Go watch Wally's episode. It's awesome.
Like picked up, period, or picked up like I talked on everybody else's.
We talked about
Frank,
this.
Can you throw his YouTube out?
And you're on Morph Market, and you're on Facebook, and you're on Instagram. GECKO COVE, folks. GECKO COVE.
Yep, and I've got, if you really dig in the oranges right now, I've got a baby that's really, really affordable on auction. Ends in less than 24 hours.
There you go.
And I've got a full sibling. If you miss out on that one too, that's pretty identical. So, but yeah, Morph Market, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. You can reach out to me anywhere. If you're not looking to buy a gecko and just want to chat geckos, I'm happy to respond. I am not one of those people where you have to buy from me to talk to me. Just reach out, and if I have time, great. If I've got my kids, they come first. But I have fun. I mean, this is just a fun hobby for me. So.
Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes or waffles? Frank wants to know about
Frank or waffles.
This was the tough one. And if we would have asked this before in the beginning of the show and you would have answered incorrectly, we would have lost 2 or 3 people.
Probably.
Including Frank.
So I can never give a straightforward answer. A good waffle will beat pancakes any day, but more pancakes are edible than bad waffles, if that makes sense.
Wait, is that the right answer? I don't know.
So waffles wins. Good waffles
win. Outstanding. We've had
Frank. It's okay.
Yeah, Frank. It's okay. Let's come down to earth. Let's get off the ledge. Bobby, thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been a blast. And before Frank mentions a 24-hour show, I'm going to.
I did too.
You knew I don't talk very much, so I apologize. You just got me going.
Very comfortable talking.
Yes.
Comfortable. Thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Anytime you're welcome on our show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be on your show, and you guys are such a positive force in this community. I've been binging you for as long as I've been in the hobby, and I appreciate everything that you've done. You just honestly, guys, if you've ever met Wally in person, he is as genuine as he seems right now. Wally and Annette, you guys are fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
People tolerate me because of Nanette, so I appreciate that, but I know that it's all lies.
Hey, they're our better half, right?
Liar. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
You take care, Bobby. Thank you very much again.
Have a
See
good
you,
night.
Thank
folks.
you so much. Have
Good
a great
night.
night, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.